On this Sunday night, the allegations against Admiral Art McDonald. Global News uncovers the details surrounding accusations of sexual misconduct.
Any allegations or any information that were brought forward was always quickly and taken to the appropriate authorities for the appropriate action.
What did the defense minister know? Vaccination prioritization. Should essential workers move up to get the shot? Plus, the officer accused of killing George Floyd about to stand trial. And the royal squabble.
The firm is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us.
The Queen and the Sussexes remain firm on their break.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We have new and troubling revelations about the investigation into allegations of inappropriate behavior at the military's highest level. Global News has learned how the Canadian Forces found out about the sexual misconduct allegation that forced the newly minted Chief of the Defense Staff, Admiral Art McDonald, to step aside while an investigation is ongoing. In our top story tonight, a whistleblower comes forward with claims about what the Defense Minister's office knew. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has the exclusive details. Mercedes?
Allegations against Admiral Art McDonald surfaced in Victoria, BC on February 3rd, one day after Global News revealed sexual misconduct accusations against General Jonathan Vance. A confidential source with direct knowledge of the matter tells Global News Lieutenant Commander Raymond Trotter, a 21-year veteran of the Royal Canadian Navy, was approached by a female subordinate. The source says the woman described an incident from roughly a decade ago when Admiral McDonald was a multinational task force commander in Canada's north. Trotter was obligated to report what he heard. But finding the right authority to flag the allegations to revealed the challenges faced by victims and whistleblowers when trying to come forward. The source says Trotter was bounced between offices, starting with the military's Sexual Misconduct Response Center, which told him it could not receive reports of sexual misconduct. The source says that Trotter contacted the Office for the Minister of National Defense, saying he had allegations against the Chief of the Defense Staff. According to the source, the office passed him to a civil servant who promised to brief the minister. A spokesperson for Minister Sajjan says at no point did the source speak with political staff and would not comment on whether or not they were aware of the call or brief the minister. Ultimately, the source says Trotter reported the allegation to military police. Roughly 3 weeks after Trotter notified those authorities, Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan announced McDonald was stepping aside, citing a police investigation. In a statement to Global News, McDonald said, "As there is an ongoing investigation and on the advice of legal counsel, I am not making any statements at this time." After Trotter came forward, two sources say he received 2 calls from men using blocked numbers. He did not recognize their voices, but they identified themselves as senior members of the military and government. Both warned him against testifying with the information he had and said doing so would jeopardize his military career. Global News has learned that opposition members of the Commons Defense Committee plan to subpoena Trotter when the committee meets Monday, part of a push to expand its study into sexual misconduct in the military. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan has insisted that any complaints brought to his office have always been handled properly.
Any allegations or any information that were brought forward was always quickly and taken to the appropriate authorities for the appropriate action.
Two sources say Trotter also reported a second allegation unrelated to the incident of alleged sexual misconduct concerning McDonald. That incident allegedly involved comments made by senior naval officers about sexual bondage, referencing 50 Shades of Grey. According to sources, the comments were made during a Zoom call attended by more than 100 naval officers. One source says Trotter quickly received blowback, including from his chain of command. Robin?
Mercedes Stephenson with this exclusive story. To Canada's vaccination campaign now. Provinces will be receiving more doses of the 4 approved COVID-19 shots in the coming weeks. While there is a priority for the country's most vulnerable, there is a growing debate over who else should be included. Heather Yourex-West explains.
High school teacher Thomas Shea is one of many Canadians unable to work at home. He's an essential worker, but he's not able to get immunized right now.
It makes me a little bit anxious. I feel devalued as a worker.
The National Advisory Committee on Immunization has recommended essential workers be immunized during the second phase of the vaccine rollout. But so far, many provinces are focusing instead on a person's age or medical condition. Ontario says essential workers like teachers and farm workers will be immunized in the latter part of phase 2, focusing on hard-hit neighborhoods until then.
We need to be aware of that a lot of the essential workers who cannot work from home and have a high rate of contact with other people are actually in these highest risk neighborhoods.
Essential workers not only face an increased risk of contracting COVID-19, they're also more likely to pass the virus on. According to modeling out of BC, prioritizing them for vaccine could save lives.
If we prioritized high contact, high risk people earlier, we could save between 100,000 or up to 200,000 infections and up to 600 deaths by vaccinating people who are at risk of exposure and transmission. And that's because we prevent cases from happening in the first place.
We're seeing, especially in the households of essential workers, if you have, say, 6 or 7 people in the household, they can all get infected. And of course, this can then spill over into the community at large.
It's something Alberta has seen happen several times after large outbreaks in meat processing plants. But instead of prioritizing meat processing employees next for vaccine, Alberta is instead focusing on age, allowing anyone 50 or older to be immunized next.
If we just use an age-based approach with an online booking system in English, it is very clear, I think, that we will not reach the populations that are most disproportionately impacted.
In some parts of the country, COVID-19 numbers are once again on the rise. And with vaccine supply limited, there is significant need to get the next phase of Canada's vaccine rollout right. Heather, Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Ontario recorded nearly 1,300 new cases of COVID-19 today, just as restrictions are set to ease in more regions. As of midnight, the stay-at-home order expires for Toronto and Peel. Both regions will move into the gray lockdown zone. That allows non-essential retailers to reopen at limited capacity. But gyms and personal care services will remain closed. Restaurants will be restricted to takeout service only. Quebec will move more regions into the lower orange alert level at midnight, but Montreal will remain in red, the highest level because of rising cases involving a highly contagious variant. Residents across the rest of the province will now be permitted to eat inside restaurants and go to the gym. The nighttime curfew will be pushed back to 9:30 p.m. The U.S. Senate has narrowly approved a sweeping pandemic relief package. The $1.9 trillion bill will provide direct payments of up to $1,400 for most Americans. It also extends emergency unemployment benefits and provides aid to cash-strapped state and local governments. The bill passed without one Republican vote in a 25-hour Senate marathon. It now heads to the House for final passage. President Joe Biden has signed an executive order aimed at ensuring voting rights as he marked the anniversary of Bloody Sunday and the Civil Rights March in Selma, Alabama.
Elected officials in 43 states have already introduced over 250 bills to make it harder for Americans to vote. We cannot let them succeed. I'm signing an executive order to make it easier for eligible voters to register to vote and improve access to voting.
On this day in 1965, hundreds of civil rights activists began marching from Selma to Alabama's state capital, Montgomery, to protest the struggles black people had voting despite a constitutional right. State troopers attacked the demonstrators as they crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The shock of the assault on non-violent protesters sparked a nationwide uproar. It led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act later that year. The city of Minneapolis is bracing for the start of Derek Chauvin's trial. Chauvin is the former police officer accused of murdering George Floyd. The disturbing and heartbreaking video of Floyd dying with a knee on his throat set off protests around the world. And the calls for justice haven't ended, especially from his family. Jennifer Johnson reports.
Fencing and barriers have been erected around the Hennepin County Government Center, where the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin begins Monday.
Assaultive or riotous behavior towards anyone will not be tolerated. Setting fires to structures of any kind will not be tolerated.
Ain't no power like the power of the people.
Ahead of the trial, protests have been held in Minneapolis and outside the governor's home in St. Paul, demanding justice not only for Floyd, but other victims of police brutality.
We want a fair shot without having our hands tied behind our backs, a boot on our neck, or a gun to our children's head or our own head.
The former officer faces charges of murder and manslaughter after being videotaped kneeling on Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes.
My brother said, "I can't breathe," multiple times, but the officer sat on his neck with a smirk on his face. My brother screamed, "Tell my kids I love them," as his soul left his body.
Some fear the trial could be delayed after the Minnesota Court of Appeals ordered a judge to reconsider adding third-degree murder to Chauvin's charges, much easier for prosecutors to prove.
Third degree is basically extreme indifference to someone else's life. It's if you're doing something so reckless and dangerous that you don't care about if someone dies.
Many protesters say an acquittal of Chauvin should not happen.
The eyes of the world are going to be on Minnesota with this upcoming trial.
Activists say they plan to protest outside the courthouse every day of the trial.
You have to have compassion. You have to feel what these people are feeling. And if you can't, don't call yourself a good person.
The trial comes after the House last week passed the most ambitious plan in decades to overhaul policing nationwide, the George Floyd Justice Policing Act. That act, which aims to combat police misconduct and the use of excessive force, faces a tougher fight in the Senate, but has the support of President Joe Biden. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, more troubles for New York's governor. Could the allegations against Andrew Cuomo force him to step down? Plus, the Pope's historic visit to Iraq. In the U.S., one of that country's most famous faces in the pandemic is under fire in 2 separate scandals. 4 different women have now accused New York Governor Andrew Cuomo of inappropriate conduct. That's on top of allegations his administration covered up deaths from COVID-19 in the state's nursing homes. As Jackson Prosco reports, the once rising star in America's COVID crisis now faces calls to leave office.
I'm not going to resign. I work for the people of the state of New York. They elected me.
Defiant, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is clinging to power, but for how much longer?
Without explicitly saying it, he implied to me that I was old enough for him and he was lonely.
This week, Cuomo's former aide, Charlotte Bennett, came forward with her story of alleged sexual harassment.
I thought, he's trying to sleep with me. The governor's trying to sleep with me.
Cuomo has apologized without admitting wrongdoing.
I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable.
But his problems don't stop there. He and his administration are under fire and under investigation for allegedly hiding the number of COVID deaths in the state's nursing homes. The New York Times reports some of those efforts were underway just as Cuomo started writing a book about his pandemic achievements in a state where more than 47,000 people perished.
We need a full investigation into the allegations of sexual harassment. We need a full investigation into the nursing home scandal.
New York City is currently
It's a stunning fall for a governor who won an Emmy for his popular pandemic briefings.
This was the trajectory of COVID in our state.
There was once talk of a future presidential run. Now there are calls for Cuomo to resign or be impeached.
One of the reasons why he's facing the difficulties he's facing, and he doesn't have the friends around him who might stand up for him.
The Cuomo name is legendary in New York. His father was once governor. His brother is CNN anchor Chris Cuomo.
Is it true that this was the swab that the nurse was actually using on you?
Who helped promote the elder Cuomo during the pandemic and is now ducking one of the biggest stories in the country.
And obviously, I cannot cover it because he is my brother.
Now left with few friends and even fewer defenders, a political dynasty has come crashing down as the embattled governor tries to hang on. Jackson Prosco, Global News.
Pope Francis has wrapped up an historic visit to Iraq with an open-air Sunday Mass for thousands of people and visiting war-ravaged regions of the country.
Salam, salam, salam.
With a message consistently focused on peace, the pontiff is aiming at building a better rapport between Christians and Muslims in the country. He toured an area where people faced religious persecution under the control of the so-called Islamic State. Francis also spent time with Abdullah Kurdi, the Syrian father whose 2-year-old son Alan drowned in the Mediterranean, along with his mother and older brother. The heartbreaking image of the toddler washed up on a beach in Turkey in 2015 turned the world's attention to the plight of refugees. Still ahead, the racist abuse endured by Britain's soccer players grows beyond the stadium.
You're watching Global National.
For years, Major League Sports stayed away from the Black Lives Matter movement. NFL players wanting to protest racial injustices were banned from kneeling during the American anthem. Then this past summer, when anti-racism activism surged, the sports world picked up the ball. But in the UK, the rise of virtual racism has left some pro soccer players feeling defenseless. Redmond Shannon explains.
When English soccer leagues resumed in empty stadiums after the first lockdown, it was just a few days after the killing of George Floyd. Players united to take a knee, but at one game they looked up to see this: White Lives Matter, a banner paid for by a fan. And with the stands still empty, it appears more people are going online to send racist messages to players.
I've received messages. I've received multiple messages in, DMs, saying, horrible things. Race issues are now coming to the front of agendas. I think it's more in people's minds, and I think there is a bit of a reluctance sometimes for people to accept that that's the way that things are going.
Barely a week goes by without another player highlighting the vile racist abuse they get online. Football Association President Prince William tweeted that the responsibility extends to the social media platforms. Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, says it's making changes to ban repeat offenders and to better filter direct messages. The Players' Union and retired stars say it's not enough.
How easy it is for people simply to make a fake profile and engage in this kind of racist abuse. It's shocking in its scope.
Shaka Hislop played in the Premier League and World Cup. In the 90s, he set up a racism education charity.
They also have to do more about people just making these fake online profiles.
The problem is, verifying user identities goes against the anonymous free speech ethos of many online platforms. Activists say racism's root causes need to be addressed too.
It's very much society's problem, racism, not football's, but then it's coming back at the moment in social media.
Abuse across social media is nothing new, but it appears as though the voices of these high-profile sports stars could be forcing change. The British government is now promising legislation designed to hold social media giants more accountable. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Up next, Royal Showdown. The Queen celebrates the Commonwealth before Harry and Meghan tell all. Tonight, a real-life royal rift is making for must-see TV. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan, are breaking their silence on why they left the royal family. As Mike LeCouture explains, the exclusive interview with Oprah Winfrey may come at a cost for the couple.
If that comes with risk of losing things, there's a lot that's been lost already.
The build-up has been like nearly nothing viewers have seen before. An inside and unvarnished look at the British royals from Prince Harry and Meghan set the broadcast nearly a year to the day the couple attended their last official family function as royals.
I don't know how they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent if there is an active role that the firm is playing in perpetuating falsehoods about us.
The firm is the not-so-friendly term to describe the often reserved and sometimes restrictive royal family. Some see similarities between this interview and the one given by Princess Diana decades ago, in which she broke her silence alone.
I can't begin to imagine what it must have been like for her going through this process by herself all those years ago.
Diana's interview shattered the public image of the royal family, and observers believe it could happen again after Meghan and Harry's candid conversation.
They spent years trying to repair their image in the public eye. It's going to be exactly the same with this one. No matter what Harry and Meghan say, people are going to be very quick to form opinions.
Perhaps in an effort to counter any negative narrative, the Queen released this message ahead of Commonwealth Day, trying to paint the royals as relatable.
In our everyday lives, we have had to become more accustomed to connecting and communicating via innovative technology, which has been new to some of us.
Notably absent from the video were Meghan and Harry, who relinquished royal duties a year ago, in part because of the intense media glare.
We all know what the British press can be like, and it was destroying my mental health. I was like, this is toxic.
Moving to California helped the couple escape that life, but granting these types of interviews will thrust them right back into the spotlight. Mike LeCouture, Global News.
And the primetime special airs tonight. You can watch it right here on Global. And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with a fight on the ice in two different provinces. Wearing bright yellow hoodies, Montreal brothers Mark and Scott Brody skated for nearly 10 hours to raise funds for the Alzheimer's Society. They were inspired by Toronto's Stephen McNeil, who also skated for 10 hours. It's his 9th year skating in honor of his mother, who suffered from this disease. Thank you for watching. Good night.